Eddie Redmayne, just months after having won the Oscar, there's buzz again, you're back in the race. But I'd like to go back to last year because you ran a classic race. It was, from our pundit point of view, exciting because initially Michael Keaton seemed to be out front, and then you both won Golden Globes, and then you pulled ahead of the gang.
I feel like a horse. You're making me literally feel like a horse. That's good.
Well, what was it like? Because then at SAG you pulled ahead and had this exhilarating last ride.
Do you know what? That film was such a... The Theory of Everything was such a long experience in the coming. I was on a list of people to play that part, and I wasn't top of the list. Even getting the part was a thrill. You then make the film. There's something alchemy-like about filmmaking. You have no idea whether it's going to work, and when people seem to react to it at Toronto, it was wonderful to put it out into the world. I think when the buzz starts surrounding a film, particularly a little film like that, you have to do everything you can to try and make it reach an audience. But it seems so weird when you're being pitched against other people. I mean, I suppose particularly Birdman, which I thought was utterly extraordinary, and Michael was utterly extraordinary. For me, the actual... I know you sounding like horses. Of course, it's an extraordinary thing to get to even enter that discussion. But getting to meet those people, for me, getting to hang out with Michael Keaton, getting to, all the people that I was nominated with was wonderful.
In the Danish Girl, we're suddenly now dealing with transgender issues, and that's the T in LGBT. Why did it take so long for this discussion to happen and for people to care so much?
That's a very good question, and one of the things that continues to sort of shock me, I suppose, when I read the script of The Danish Girl, in it you saw violence against a trans woman, you saw discrimination, you saw her struggling to find with doctors and healthcare, and what I found astounding is that 70 or 80 years on, whilst there has been some progression, there is still so far to go. The violence against trans women, particularly trans women of colour in the United States, but all over the world, healthcare problems, the fact that you can be fired in 32 states in America for being trans. It's astounding to me that despite this story, it's taken so long. And I think what's amazing in the past year, the discussion has become mainstream, and it's about cisgender people educating themselves and learning to be allies to the trans community, and that's what the great education that I've had in this film, because I was incredibly ignorant when I was doing Les Miserables and I was sent this script. It's about educating yourself, really.
Do you think there's a little bit of Lili in most men?
I think, I suppose one of the great things I've learned about this film, I'd never really thought about gender previously, and I suppose I'd accepted the binary terms of masculine and feminine, and when I really started to think about it, I was going, so what is masculine? It's like, I suppose the old school thing is if you're sporty or you're, then that's masculine, and if you're arty, maybe you're feminine, but that feels antiquated in this day and age. It feels to me that those terms are quite... they're boxing things, and I'm one of the people that likes to box things. I need I think it's a human nature to get to concretize things. But what I've learned is that there's a spectrum, and we're all on it in some ways between, these two things, and there should be no judgment within that. We've only got one shot at life, and just what it takes to be yourself is quite a huge amount.
There are these wonderful little subtle parts of your performance that are unspoken. For example, I just loved it when Einar walks by the wardrobe in the one studio and just touches all the women's clothes as he walks by. And those are kind of revealing character traits that say a lot about what's happening inside of him. How much of that do you explore and bring out, and how much happens in the script? Or what kind of improv was there?
That's a really interesting question. One of the things that, when you read about Lili's and Gerda's story, the fact that Lili posed for Gerda when she was living as Einar because someone couldn't come for a fitting, Ulla couldn't come for the fitting, and that was this moment of catalyst. This was this moment of, wow, actually I'm a woman. That felt, from all the trans women I met, it felt inauthentic. Every trans person I met had known from the age of 3 or 4 that they had a different gender to that they were assigned at birth. And in the script, Lucinda had talked about knowing that as a child Lili was there, she was always there, she was always waiting. So I discussed with Tom about bringing in moments in which there's an amazing drawing of Lili when she's living as Einar, and she has this incredibly high starched collar and this suit, and it's incredibly rigid, and it felt to me that that was a reveal. It was as if society and herself had put on this exoskeleton, and what my job was to uncover Lili from the confines of that masculinity. So things like touching the clothes, I wanted to make them as subconscious as possible, because that's at that moment what I think they were.
She matters so much in history because she was the first that we know of to have the operation, and then she actually has 2 operations in the movie, and she had a few more in real life. Why did she do that? I mean, this was the era before antibiotics. It was a life and death risk. Why wasn't it enough for her to say, let Lili come out, let me act her out, and let me dress the part, but stop there?
Because I think the notion of acting out or dressing the part is not what being trans is about. It's your mind. It's what gender you are in your soul, in your mind. Nowadays, many trans women will not have undergone gender confirmation surgery. Being trans is not about what has happened to you physically, whether you've taken hormones or anything. It's about what you are here. For Lili specifically, that journey was important, and there was a physical element to it. I think also at that period, how you were judged gender-wise in that binary thing of being male or female was to do with your gonads, and so it was important for her. But what I think is astounding is, even though she knew all those stakes, she knew there were no antibiotics, she knew there was a high risk of death, but the idea that we only have one lifetime, and what it takes to be authentic and to be yourself, how much she was willing to fight for that at the risk of death. You know, the suicide rate amongst transgender women or transgender people is attempted suicide is 41%. I mean, that shows that if you can't, that statistic in itself seems to show to me that the cost of what it is to live a life authentic.
Last question. Actors sometimes get to take home the wardrobe. Were you tempted to take home Lili's stuff?
Oh God, I thought what Paco, who's the costume designer, did was so beautiful. So the wardrobe side of this film was very interesting for me, because it was the 1920s was a period of change. It was post-war. Women had taken on many of the male roles in jobs in society as the men had gone off to war. As a consequence, when in the 1920s there was an androgyny that was creating, women's haircuts became shorter, the clothes became less about curves, they were more sort of boyish in some ways. And so certainly the investigation into that period and that costume was kind of an interesting part of the film, but I haven't taken any home.